So, I would have done this much earlier in the day, but my neighbor over there was having either really good sex or was being brutally murdered. I couldn't tell, so I think it would have been distracting if I tried to do this with that going on back there. That being said, here we go. A little bit of history for you. Basically, when you watch a lot of anime and you come across certain ones that have the samurai theme going on, and you have certain time periods, feudal time periods, they always call it the feudal time period, the warring states, that kind of thing going on. They're really talking about two particular types of, or two actually periods of history going on in Japan. One happened right after the other. The first part is called the Sengoku period, which is actually the warring states period for Japan, for feudal Japan. That's when everything, there was no central government, there was an emperor, but he was pretty much a figurehead in Edo, nowadays Tokyo, and he really didn't mean anything. So if you saw the video I did about the movie Ron, that's actually a pretty good descriptor of basically the history of what's going on around there at that time period. The other time period, which falls exactly right on the heels of that, is the Tokugawa period of government. And that happened, that's when a centralized government was created by Oda Nobunaga. You might be familiar with that name because that name is thrown around a lot in anime, particularly the ones that when we're talking about samurai, talking about the feudal states and stuff like that. In particular, you can watch Inuyasha, and it calls its the setting as the feudal Japan. Well, what they're really referring to is a Sengoku period, where you notice that there was no really, central figure. It's just the band walking around and getting the Shikan Jewel back together. However, you do see in one episode Oda Nobunaga as a child, so you can tell that that's the time period, is Sengoku. And it takes place right probably about, I would call it about 30 years before the Battle of Sekigahara. What that battle is famous for is that it happened in the year 1600 in October, and that was the big battle that Oda Nobunaga fought. I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong. That is not Oda Nobunaga. That was Tokugawa Ieyasu who fought that battle. He actually took over for Oda Nobunaga, who was betrayed, and he later did the whole seppuku thing. But anyway, getting ahead of myself. So Oda Nobunaga, he unites Japan. He's about to go on to create a centralized government. He's betrayed. He kills himself. So you have two big warring factions, basically North and South. Sound familiar? So anyway, so after this big battle happens, centralized government happens, it's the Tokugawa regime. So what that is, you're talking about the shoguns, you're talking about the samurai, and when you're watching anime and you hear about you watch stories about the old giving way to the new, certain samurai codes falling away to new codes, things like that. They're talking about the Tokugawa style of government, which is called Bakufu. There's still an emperor, but you have all these shoguns and samurai of various levels. Now, if you watch anime like Cowboy Bebop or Samurai Champloo, that's when you really talk about Tokugawa. You notice, like for example, in Cowboy Bebop, Spike and Vicious have that final battle at the end, right? And what do they fight with? Vicious fights with the samurai sword, the old way. Spike fights with a gun, the new way. Alright? If for some insane reason you haven't watched this anime, I'm not going to give away the ending. Go watch it. For those of you who know who wins, you get the idea. I think you can kind of figure it out even if you haven't watched it. But Samurai Champloo talks about not only giving way, for the old giving way to the new, but about old tensions. Because there's a period in time where the survivors of the Battle of Sekigahara kind of still clash. You get a lot of good duel stories out of Japan from that little period of time, about 10 years. There's some famous ones, not so famous ones, famous samurai duels, famous samurai. But you really talk about, that's when you talk about bureaucrats coming in and kind of taking down the samurai a few pegs over the years. So when you're watching Samurai Champloo, you notice the two characters. One, Jin, he's kind of slovenly and he's just kind of all over the place, but he's a really good fighter. He's actually based on a real samurai whose name is escaping me at the moment. And then you have his counterpart, who is the ultimate samurai, the Bushido Code, the whole 9 yards. They don't fight each other throughout the entire series until the very end. Well, and again, I'm not going to give that away, but you get the idea. There's a lot of history in these animes, in some of these animes, and there's some really good stories that you can find in there, but you need to know a little bit of the history. So if you're willing to check some of this stuff out, I got a couple books for you. Tokugawa, Japan. The translation is by Conrad Topman, and it's from the University of Tokyo Press. So this is straight from the source. This book talks about, obviously, Tokugawa, Japan, but also talks about the Battle of Sekigahara and Oda Nobunaga. It's a lot of vowels. Talks about this in great detail, so if you want to know more about that guy, about Tokugawa Ieyasu and the creation of the Tokugawa government and the fall of the samurai, start with this. If you want to get an idea of how bureaucratized the samurai got, and why there were such these duels happening, you can actually get a copy of an autobiography of a Tokugawa samurai, Misui's story. Misui is actually a very low-level samurai. Samurai have, as there are classes, the samurai class has classes within it. So he was kind of low part of the totem pole. And he talks about duels, he talks about entitlements, he talks about getting a job, because at one point there's no one else to fight, so he's just walking around like, okay, somebody give me a job. So anyway, good reference points to start here. So the next time you watch an anime, they say Feudal Japan, they give you maybe a time, check it out. It's actually really interesting stuff out there. Okay, two things real quick. First things first, I am horrible at Japanese, so I realize I really massacred some names during the course of this video. I apologize for that. I just don't know Japanese that well, and so it's kind of hard for me to pronounce that stuff. Clearly not Japanese. Again, I apologize. Don't beat me up for it. Okay, second thing. For those of you who go to Otakon, if you haven't yet, go online to their website. There is a survey. They want you, either former members or current members, people who have actually gone to the convention recently. They want to know something. They want to mail out the badges this year. There was a horrible line problem in 2014. So they're trying to figure out what to do. And one of their answers is, well, what if we mail the badges like other conventions? Go online, go to the website, especially if you go to Otakon and you're thinking about going again this year. Get online, put in your 2 cents. They really need that information, okay? So again, go online and figure out whether or not you want your badges mailed or if you want to stand in line. For those of you who think the pre-reg registration line is a fun thing to do and would miss that, I'm going to put up a little music video of footage that I've taken over the years of standing in the pre-registration line. So enjoy.